I have the honor today of introducing our guest speaker, and we've served on several committees over the years, and she has adopted me as one of her two adopted fathers, the other being Lyle. And I don't know which one of us is the most jealous of the other, but I wanted to take, it's a real honor for me to take the time to introduce Erin, and I wanted to, I've become very close with Erin and her family. Her brother-in-law, Jesse Jones, is a part of the Seattle Breakfast Group, so we got another affinity relationship there too. But Erin has been involved in and around schools for the past 26 years. She has taught in a variety of environments, from predominantly black to predominantly white to some of the most diverse communities in the nation. Erin received an award for the most innovative foreign language teacher in 2007 while working in Tacoma, and was the Washington State Milken Educator of the Year in 2008 while teaching in Spokane. She received recognition at the White House in March of 2013 as a champion of change, and was Washington State PTA Outstanding Educator in 2015. After serving as a classroom teacher and instruction coach, Erin worked as an executive for 2 state superintendents. Erin left the office of the Superintendent of Public Instructions in 2012 to work in college access at the school district level. She left her job to run as a candidate for state superintendent and was the first black woman to run for any state office in Washington State, a race she lost by a mere 1%. Erin has 1 college graduate, 1 who is a senior at Harvey Mudd College, and 1 starting a welding program in the fall. Her husband of 25 years, James, is a teacher at North Thurston School District, and James and one of her sons is teaching or is coaching a football game tonight against Oak Harbor. So it's going to be a very interesting day for the family with regards to that competition. I talked a little bit earlier, and I'll bring Erin up in a second, about the fact that it's very important that we continue to understand the needs that we have in not just K-12, but also that we have in higher ed. And I know Erin is a strong advocate of making sure that we're making kids of color are being college ready and career ready, and that we don't lose sight of them once they get into the higher education system. We really still need that support.
My husband and our son are coaching football for the first time this year together, high school football. It's something my son has wanted to do with his dad since he was 5 years old. And they made the playoffs. And that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a pretty exciting. So they both this morning are like, I finally told my son, would you go run or something? Because I just cannot watch this stress. Like, just go run. But my husband was no different when he got up this morning. But it is excited to have a family of educators. Most of you have heard my story before, but there was a story that I just started telling last year that I'm gonna start with. And it's a story that really took me about 20 years to tell. As a public speaker, I don't ever tell stories that will make me upset, to the point that I start crying. I try not to tell stories. So there's a story that has been in my gut that I haven't been able to tell until this last year, but I'm gonna start with that story because I think it sets the tone for why I do this work and why I'm so passionate about this work. But I want to give you a context for why all of that travel and why this is so important to me and why I'm so excited to be here and why in every space I go into, people say, you're just so energized, because I'm doing what I believe I was called to do. And it's what I want for every young person, and it's why I got into teaching, because I want young people to find that thing that moves them. That's not just a job, but it's something that moves them even when they don't want it to. That's what I want, and I know that that's the space that I sit in. But for those of you who have, this is the first time you're meeting me, I was orphaned at birth. And I was orphaned at birth because my mother was a white woman and my father was a black man in 1971. Now, we see all kinds of biracial kids out here now. And in fact, Pierce County, South King County has the largest percentage per capita of biracial students because of Base Lewis McChord. It was one of the first military bases that a black man who had a non-black wife could come to and be safe. And so this migration started. So to kids here, they think this is normal, biracial kids. Well, in Minnesota, where I was born, that was not a normal thing. And so I was left in the hospital the day that I was born. And I'm sure people in the hospital said, oh, another welfare child, here we go again. On my birth certificate, it says Negro for the name of my dad. That's what's on my official certificate. But here's the story that it's taken me a long time to tell, and you can go to the first picture. Most of you have met my mom. My mom has been involved with me in education for the last 10 years. Wherever she can go with me, she would have come today, except for that I'm going to Bellevue after this and then all over the world. So she's like, no, I'm not doing that. I like you a lot, but I'm not doing that. But my white parents would adopt me, and the community was not so happy about that. My dad's family would end up absolutely embracing me, and I tell people, this is me. My dad had combed out my hair with the white people comb, which is what you have in 1971 in Minnesota, okay? I am not tender-headed for the black folks in the room, because my hair was combed with the white people comb for far too long. But my parents said yes to a circumstance that would change everything about their lives. They said yes to a circumstance that would cause their community to turn against them. And what's beautiful is that my dad's side of the family really embraced us. And this is actually our very first family reunion. It took 50 years to have one. We had this summer. And I'll never forget, my dad and his brother, the two oldest in the family alive right now. And my dad's brother organized the thing, and they were so excited to have me come. And then with all the political stuff that was happening, we're 3 weeks out, and my dad says to me one night with tears in his eyes, honey, I don't know if bringing you and James to northern Minnesota right now is a good thing. And he was really stressed out. I don't want anyone to say anything to you, Erin. I'm really worried. I don't know that you should come. And I said, Dad, I ran for office. I'm good. We're going to manage. James is coming too. It's going to be 2 large black folks in northern Minnesota. We're going to be fine. And here's what's beautiful about what happened with my dad's family this summer. And my cousins and I are all 6 feet taller. We are all basketball players. We're all teachers, and we all sing. I don't believe in accidents. I believe I was adopted into the right family. But I walked into the church where my cousin on the left side is a pastor. And he hosted the family gathering this summer. And I walked into the church, and everyone had followed my campaign. And they were all so proud. All these super conservative, white Scandinavians were so proud of Erin. And to watch my dad watch his family embrace me fully was probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. That's not the story I haven't been able to tell, though. The story I haven't been able to tell is the story of my mother's family. Because my mother's family was not so forgiving. My mother's family was not so accepting. And in fact, when I was 9 years old, my mom's mom would pass away. And she died of pneumonia. And 3 weeks later, my grandfather would call her and say, Dorothy, I'm marrying the organist from your mom's funeral. 3 weeks later. This is northern Minnesota, okay? Let me just paint a picture for you. She had lost her husband. He was very wealthy. She didn't know how to pay bills. She'd never, ever paid a bill in her life. He'd never cooked anything but a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that is not cooking. So it was a match made in northern Minnesota heaven. They were made for each other. And they would get married. We would not go to the wedding, but at Christmas, they would invite us back to their home. And of course, she was very wealthy, so she had a beautiful home on a lake. And we get to the home, and there are 16 other grandbabies besides us. And you know what? When little kids are small, they don't care about skin color. You just play. And we would all play together, have the best time, and we'd have dinner together, have the best time. And then after dinner, they would line us all up downstairs in the finished basement to give away Christmas presents. Now, my parents are teachers. We did not get nice Christmas presents. I was happy if I got a basketball. But this was rich grandma, and we were so excited to get rich grandma presents. So we're lined up, ready to go. And do you know grandma passed me and passed my brother? We're the youngest. And gave a gift to the next kid. And then she passed my brother, and she passed me again. And after 3 or 4 times, I watched as my mom grabbed my dad's hand and took her upstairs. I was like, I'm staying right here to get my Christmas present. And she'd pass us 4 or 5 more times. And finally, I realized we're not getting Christmas this year. And I grabbed my little brother's hand and went to go find my parents. And when I got to the top of the stairs, I could hear my mother crying. And I don't know if you can remember the first time you heard your mother cry. It is a horrible thing. And I get to the top of the stairs, and my dad's holding my mom, and he hears me on the stairs, and he said, Erin, you take your brother outside now to the car. It is northern Minnesota on Christmas Day. I don't know if you've ever been to northern Minnesota on Christmas Day. It's cold outside. And it's not Spokane cold. It's like negative 20 degrees cold outside. Okay? But I took my little brother outside, and we sat in the car for what seemed like an eternity. And I don't know if you have any friends who are Scandinavian, but Scandinavians of a certain generation don't talk about stuff that's controversial. And so my parents would get into the car about 10 minutes later, and we would never speak of Grandma and Grandpa again. I mean, not ever. To this day, we don't talk about Grandma and Grandpa. Flash forward 19 years, I was 28 years old. We had just moved to Tacoma and discovered that my sister-in-law was a Hilltop Crip. She was really a recovering Hilltop Crip. She'd already gone to jail and was leaving her little girl in drug houses for days. She'd forget where she'd left her. And one day, there was a knock on the door, and it was my sister-in-law, and she had her little girl, and she knew I was a stay-at-home mom. My kids were 1 and 3. Her daughter was 2. And she said, Erin, can you watch her? I know that I can't take care of her. I know I'm not being a good mom right now. Can you just keep her? And I said, sure. How do you say no? And so I have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old. At the time, I was playing in a men's basketball league, and I knew I can't keep playing. I have to just stop everything and sew into this little girl. This little girl would not allow my husband to be in the same room with her for 2 months. So we knew already at 2 years old, when you get left in drug houses for days at a time, stuff happens to you. And we knew already then something has happened to this child. And so I said, you know what? Everything stops. And I'm just going to sew into these babies. And I did. And I made a promise to myself, I'm not going to touch a basketball. I'm not going to go to a gym for a year. And I did. I gave up a year. At the end of that year, I get this phone call. Erin Jones, this is the Seattle Storm. Okay. Well, we got your name from someone. We're doing an open tryout. We'd like to invite you to try out. Are you sure? What I wanted to say is, you realize I'm 29 years old with 3 small children, and I haven't touched a basketball for a year. But I didn't say that. I said, when's the tryout? And 3 months later, she said, you have 3 months to prepare. Meanwhile, I still have 3 small children at home. The next day, my mother-in-law calls me, and she said, Erin, I had a dream last night that I was supposed to come live with you and help you take care of your kids. Are you sure? Yes, and she moved in immediately. And I was able to train, and I would go to the downtown YMCA in Tacoma every day, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. And one day in the far corner of this gym, there was a giant black man. He had to be at least 6'8", maybe 6'9". Like, you cannot not see him. And it was just he and I in this gym, and I'm trying to shoot free throws, and I don't know if you're a baller, but this peripheral vision thing is dangerous because I am trying to shoot, but I'm also watching this scary man that's watching me. Like, it was just kind of creepy. I don't know you. There's no one else in this gym, and you're just standing in the corner watching me shoot. And finally, I said, sir, can I help you? He said, all the managers at the YMCA have been talking about this lady, Erin Jones, who's here every single day, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. Her husband's a pastor. They don't have money, but the WNBA has offered a tryout. He said, I'm a professional manager. Would you be interested in having a free manager? Yes. I would take free. So he would take me on along with a girl from the University of Washington and a girl from Oregon State. So understand, I am 29 years old. These ladies have just graduated from college, so I'm the mama. And we go to train, and if you live in the Federal Way area or North Tacoma area, we went to train at a gym there where they had an Olympic coach trainer. And we show up the very first day, and I take off my sweats, and I'm ready to work out with this guy. We're going to get a free training by this Olympic coach, and he takes one look at me, and he says, you are old and weak, and I will not train you. I was like, you talking to me? I mean, I know I'm old, but still. And he said, did you not hear me? You are old and weak, and in 3 months, I cannot get you ready. You need to get out of my gym. I was like, really? And nobody stood up for me. And he said a third time, you are old and weak, and I need you to pick up your stuff and get out of the gym. Well, I had driven with the rest of the ladies, so I took my stuff outside and then realized I got no way to get home. I am stuck here. Norpoint, if you know Northeast Tacoma, Norpoint Gym. So I'm standing out in the parking lot crying, and then I was like, you know what? This man does not get to tell me what I'm going to do or not do. And I began to run sprints in the parking lot. And I ran sprints for an hour and a half. And the ladies came out after training, and they're like, girl, you've been out here the whole time? I said, yes, I've been out here the whole time running. He does not get to tell me where I'm going. So I would not just get a tryout for the Seattle Storm. I would end up also getting a tryout for the Portland Fire. So 3 months later, on a Friday, we would try out for 6 hours at the Rainier Beach Community Center. We would drive down to Portland on a Friday night, and 6 hours on a Saturday for the Portland Fire. About halfway through the day on Saturday, I was like, I like basketball. I do not love basketball like this. Places hurt in me that I did not even know had muscles. But I said, you know what? I finished everything that I started, and so I finished that day. And when I was done playing, this tiny little white lady would come running up to me, Erin, I've been watching you all day today. I said, really? I'm so sorry. That was not pretty. She said, no, in fact, it's the opposite. It was one of the most beautiful things I've seen. She said, I could tell you were an older player. She said, but what was great is instead of being the star, there were times when you could have shot and you passed the ball to make somebody else look good. She said, you set screens when you could have gotten open for yourself. And she said, I'm looking for a leader. She said, I played on the very first women's Olympic team. And I want to take 10 women from the United States to play against the Mexican Olympic team, and I want you to be our player captain. I said, yes. And what she didn't know is I speak Spanish fluently. And so I ended up being our player captain translator for the American team, and on my 30th birthday, we got to play against the Mexican Olympic team. And at halftime, I got to share my story in Spanish without an interpreter. I was the only person on our team who could do that. And when I was done speaking, all 10,000 people in that auditorium stood up and sang happy birthday to me. And when the game was over, about 100 little Mexican kids lined up on the sidelines, and they just wanted to shake my hand. When I get back to the United States after a summer in Mexico, and my cousin on the left side calls, and he says, Erin, I've been watching you, and I'm coaching a basketball camp right before school starts, and I need you to come to Minnesota. Now, what I knew about my cousin is he lived in the same little town where my grandma lived. That grandma that had not given us Christmas presents. And I said, Cousin Bill, I will only come if you arrange for me to talk to Grandma. He had no idea what was going on. But he said, yeah, I got you. And so I show up in town, and I make the front page of the newspaper, Black lady here to coach basketball camp. Seriously. I still have that newspaper somewhere. And I coached the camp that first day. And then I go to see my grandma. My grandfather had passed away. He had Alzheimer's for years, and so it's just Grandma. Grandma is 4'11", so she opens the door, and I am this giant person. And she invites me in, and she sits me down on her couch, and she says, Erin, I'm going to go get some tea for us. And she disappears for about 10 minutes. Can I tell you how uncomfortable that 10 minutes was? And I'm sitting there thinking, do I need to call 911? Has she had a heart attack back there? I didn't hear any thumping. And she finally comes out, and she has a shoebox in her hands. And she puts the shoebox down in front of me. And through her tears, she says these words. Actually, as she's talking, do you know my mom had sent her every school picture I ever took? Every certificate I ever won, my mom had made a copy and sent it to her. Every newspaper clipping from college and my adult life, she had sent to her. And my grandma's taking these out of the box, and she says, Erin, do you know out of the 18 grandbabies, you were always our favorite. We never told you we loved you because we didn't know how to tell a nigger we loved them. Grandma, you can't use that word. That is not a nice word. And my grandma said, well, what do I call you then? Here's why I start with this story, because there is a chasm between racism and ignorance. And we lost 20 years of life because of my grandma's ignorance. And my grandma would follow those words by saying, Erin, your grandfather went to his grave never telling you how much he loved you. Can you forgive us? Yes, Grandma. That's why I came here. I didn't come here for some basketball camp. I came here to forgive you. Why do I do this work? Because I've had to live this work out. From the day that I was born, I've had to live this work out. I've had to deal with the narratives, those negative narratives that have been perpetuated for generations in this country. And I said to my grandma that day, I forgive you, and I held her in my belly button for about an hour while we cried. And my grandmother would pass away 6 months later. And I start with that story everywhere I go now because I believe that I was placed on this earth to do this work through the lens of grace and mercy. Grace and mercy. Grace and mercy. And I learned it that day, that if my family can walk through this kind of strife and make it to the other side, I have to believe that other people can too. But it's going to require some tough conversations. Instead of cussing Grandma out for calling me the N-word, I got to show her some grace and mercy and walk alongside her. And so that is the story of my family, the new piece of that story. Now, the unfortunate part of this story is that my cousin on this side, my favorite cousin, is actually married to the granddaughter of my step-grandmother. So they're not biologically, this is small-town Minnesota again, okay? So I'm related both two ways. So when we went to our family reunion this summer, although things are great on this side, things are still not great. And there's a hole in my mother's heart. My mother never forgave her mother, never forgave her. And now my grandma's gone, and there's no way to fix that. And I don't want one more person to walk through that and say, why am I in Indiana and South Carolina and Atlanta and Spokane and White Pass and Vancouver? Because we can't afford that anymore. And when I look at this country and where we are at this moment, I will be on the road every day if that's what it takes. And I know I can't do the work by myself, and it's why I need days like today, where I see my friends in the work, where I see those of you that have been sowing seeds for generations too in this work. And this is my spirit, my soul healing today after being on the road for 6 weeks. I needed to see some of y'all, my daddies. I needed that. But just for those of you who don't know me, this is why the work. So here's where my family is today. This is what I've been up to lately. If you don't follow me on Facebook, you can go to the next picture. Here's where my family is today. As I told you, my husband and my son are coaching football together. And what's hysterical is they weigh exactly the same. And from the back, if you don't know them, I remember they went to some football camp this summer, and my friend texted me, and she said, honey, does your husband change clothes in the middle of practice sometimes? I said, no, you just saw the 23-year-old version of him. That's what that was. But they are hysterical. They are best friends. And there is nothing like watching two black men, a father and son, love each other like that. There's nothing like that. And to have young people get to watch them coach together is an incredibly beautiful thing. My younger son, Izzy, is up in the top right-hand corner. For those of you who don't know Izzy is on the spectrum. He's a high-functioning autistic. Used to call it Asperger's, but now it's just high-functioning autistic. Izzy, at 8 years old, was accused of cheating on the gifted test because, of course, a boy like you could not possibly score this high. And Izzy's response to that at 8 years old was, well, sir, I'll just take it again and score higher then. Izzy would go on to get 1 wrong on the math SAT. I think 3 wrong on the writing portion. He got 5 wrong total in the SAT. 5. 6'4", 300-pound black boy. But this is him leading his a cappella choir at college. He's at Harvey Med College on a $50,000 scholarship annual. He's a senior. He's made the dean's list every single semester. Izzy, when he was a sophomore, one of the professors responded to a survey, and somehow his answers got leaked, and this professor said, we have lowered the standards at this college to admit more black students. And instead of my son getting pissed off, he said, let's host a town hall meeting. Let's talk about this. And I got to go speak at his college last year, and the dean for equity and civil rights brought me into his office, and through tears, he said, your son is a bridge builder. When everyone else was threatening quitting this college, he said, let's stick it out and make this work. Let's hold these people accountable. Let's have the conversation about these narratives. Here's the other thing my son said, though, when I went and visited him last year. He said, Mom, if one more person asks me if I'm here on a football scholarship. Harvey Mudd does not have a football team. I mean, think about that, right? Think about that. There is not a football team. And yet, are you here because you're a large black boy? You must. But here's the other thing he said last year. Mom, do you know I'm a large black man? You know, being autistic, sometimes I have to just laugh inside because it's just hysterical, the things he says. And he says them with such a straight face because he's really serious. Do you know I'm a large black man? Yes, I've known that for a while. And I'm trying to keep a poker face. And then he says, Mom, I'm a large black man with Asperger's, and I have no filters. And you know what, Mom? I also really like to follow rules. That's just kind of how I am. And I am afraid that when I get pulled over driving for doing something that I know I didn't do, I may say something that will get me killed. And so, you know what, Mom? I'd rather just not drive. Izzy is 21. He's driven 5 times. 21 years old. And here's what I'll tell you, real talk. I'm not encouraging him to drive. Because here's what I know. He's a 6'4", 300-pound black man with Asperger's who does tell you off when you are wrong. And that's our reality right now. This is our daughter, Renika. She's the little 2-year-old who was brought to our house. And she graduated from Central Washington in June. And her dad had gotten out of prison in time to see her walk across the stage. Her dad served the longest sentence in the history of our state for his crime, 27 years. And he was able to be there. He brought his whole family up from Memphis, Tennessee to watch her walk across that stage. And so if you have any Central Washington grads, we were the blubbering idiots that were right in the middle. All of us, because we knew the cost for her. We knew what she had overcome. And what's even more beautiful is 3 weeks ago, she was hired as the communications director for the Equity in Education Coalition. And so she is doing the very work. She told me this morning as I was getting ready to leave, she's like, Mom, if one more person tells me they know you. I said, honey, you're working in equity in education. Like, what were you expecting? You shouldn't have applied for the job. Anyway, but super proud, and she moves into her new apartment here in Des Moines tomorrow. So, and this little girl, in case you don't know this story, this little girl, when she was 6 years old, we had her full-time, and she came home from her first day of school and announced to our entire house, I ain't never going to college. My mama told me only white people go to college, and Erin, you're just a white lady with brown skin. She was 6 years old. Do you know her dad, when she was 18, I went to visit her dad with her for the last back-to-school event at the prison in Aberdeen. And her dad brought me outside at one point, and he said, Erin, I can't even count the number of black men who've come into this prison who either had you as a teacher or you spoke either in their prison or at their church and inspired them. He said, you're exactly the kind of black woman I wanted my daughter around, but my wife was so jealous that she told our daughter, you were just a white lady with brown skin. Can you forgive me? I said, I forgive you. You need to tell your daughter, though. She's the one who was hurt by that more than me. But for her to walk across that stage and for her dad to bear witness, and he now is out of prison and working for Boeing. Really incredible. So her story is still unfolding. Go ahead to the next picture. This is my mom and dad today. Mom and dad live with me down in Lacey. They live about a mile away from Thelma Jackson. So Thelma Jackson literally is right halfway between my house and their house. So, but this is Mom and Dad and Izzy the day before he went back to college, and they are my absolute heroes. When I ran for office, my dad drove me 20,000 miles. He said, I want to be the white guy driving the black lady around. That's my daddy. That's my daddy. Next one. And then this, we had to go see our daughter because she stayed on college campus, and this is like one of my favorite pictures ever, the joy in this picture. Pretty incredible. Next picture. And this is a phenomenal story about the power that we have as black educators for our students. So I am driving to Wenatchee to do a presentation at Wenatchee High School this year, right the week before school started. And my phone is up on the dashboard, and a picture flashes across it. And the picture is the one in the top left-hand corner. Well, the white woman was my babysitter in Notre Dame, where my husband did his graduate work. I taught in a private school, and this young lady offered to, for free, babysit my oldest son. And we just had one kid, and it was going to cost as much as I was making as a teacher to put him in daycare. So she said, you know what, girl? You're only working half-time. I'm going to school half-time. I'll watch him the 3 hours that you're at work, and then I can go right to school. So she has been a friend of mine for the last 24 years. But I get a picture with the two of them, and I think, I know that person on the left side, but I don't know why. I haven't lived in Indiana for 25 years, so I can't figure out why I would know her. And then my friend, I see flash across the screen, Erin, look who my teaching partner is this year. Okay, it's not helping me. And then the name, Risha Donaldson. I had to pull my car over. Risha Donaldson, I taught private school for a year in Indiana. All white private school, except for 5 black children. And Risha was the only black kid in the 6th grade class. And she was in my English class. And Risha had lunch with me every single day that year as a 6th grader. I didn't realize then how terrified she was to eat lunch with the other rich kids, because she was on scholarship. So she would eat with me. It was safety. I had no idea. I didn't get it. I was right out of college. I didn't understand that dynamic. So I pulled over because I knew exactly who that girl was. I pulled my car over on the side of the road in the middle of the Wenatchee National Park, and suddenly they FaceTimed me. Risha Donaldson went back to get her master's degree in teaching to become a teacher just like Mrs. Jones. And what are the chances that she would become the teaching partner of my best friends? And so I am now mentoring Risha from thousands of miles away. She calls me every once in a while, Miss Jones, I'm having a problem with this kid or that kid. And remember that thing you did with us in writing? Can you explain that to me again? Modeling is so absolutely critical. We have got to have more teachers in our classrooms who look like our babies, because that's what paves the way for them to consider this as a profession. If they don't ever see us, why would they imagine becoming us? And that's why I spoke to 200,000 kids last year, because I know just standing up in front of a bunch of kids and celebrating teaching as a career changes how young people see their potential. And so this, for me, is such an incredible story. Next picture. So for those of you who know, I played basketball for 40 years, and when I turned 45, it was like all of this stuff. Yeah, once I sprain an ankle or break something, it does not heal like it did when I was 30 or 25. So I just said, wisdom says, let's just stop this now, okay? We got to take care of this vessel. And so I run now, one direction. Right? That's it, just not all of this, just one direction. So I've been running half marathons, and in fact, when I lost my election, my best friend, who's also biracial, she's standing next to me in the middle of us up in the left-hand corner. She's also biracial. We both have little blonde moms. Our moms are the same size. They're both about 5'1.5". They say 5'2", 5'1" on a good day, I think. But she said, Erin, you're a fighter, and with the election, you don't have control over how people vote, but with running, you do. And I think if you set a goal for yourself and you accomplish it, it'll make you feel better. And so I said, I hate running. I don't understand why people run. Why would you run without a ball? It just doesn't make any sense to me. That just sounds stupid. I hated it, running. I could do sprints that good to train for basketball, but without a ball, I never understood running. But I decided to train, and I realized, wow, that setting a goal and reaching it, and I ran my first half marathon without stopping. I did not stop at all. And in fact, I left my 2 friends. I said, y'all, I need to finish this without stopping. I know you need to stop. Will you let me? And I finished the entire first half marathon, 13.1 miles, without stopping at all. And it was the greatest accomplishment. But now I run because the work that I do is uncomfortable. And I try to run 3 to 5 miles a day to practice being uncomfortable. So I don't know if you've ever run before, but that first mile, I feel like, why am I doing this? I get about halfway through, and I'm like, why am I on this treadmill? About mile 2, I'm like, I think I'm going to die. My body just wants to give up. And then I get through mile 2 to mile 3, and I'm like, oh, I could go forever. But it's that pushing through. And so I train my body. My running is not, it's healthy, so that's a piece of it. But more importantly, it's my practice of discomfort every day. training my body, because I am mostly in white spaces with people who don't really want to talk about this stuff. And I have to practice pushing through that discomfort. And so I run every day. And what's really awesome is on my 47th birthday, my friend was hosting, Jamaica Edwards was hosting a 10K. And I was like, girl, it's my birthday, though. Why would I come run on my birthday? She said, girl, you just need to, I came all the way here from Indiana. You need to run. And I came in second place out of every man, every girl, everyone. And I was like, yes, what a way to start my 47th year. But I just love running now, and I try to do a race about every other month. It was my husband's and my 25th wedding anniversary this year. And that's important for a lot of reasons. There are so few black couples today that young people get to see. Our children, not one of our 3 children, have a friend whose parents are still together. Not one of them. It's a conversation we have in our house all the time. And in fact, for us, it's one of the reasons I try to spend as much time at my husband's school with him, so that young people can see us together, because I think it is a really important model of what's powerful. But this story is kind of funny. We went to Mazatlan for our 25th, and we stayed in a resort. And they call me La Giganta in Mexico, the giant one. But they called me La Giganta with el pelo, the hair, this year, okay? And so what's really hysterical is the concierge who was assigned to us knew that it was our anniversary, so she told all the restaurants at the resort, if the giant with the hair comes in, you need to give her and her husband a cake because it's their anniversary. So literally every restaurant we went to, there was a cake. And we hadn't said anything. And finally, at the end of the night, the concierge said, did you get all your cakes? And I said, yes. How and why? And she said, I just told them all, the giant with the hair. And we had a good laugh about that. But I love my husband. He is part of the reason that I can do what I do. He is my greatest champion, my biggest fan, absolutely supports me. And being an educator with me is just incredible. So he lets me teach in his classroom. When he's struggling with stuff around policy and unions, we have conversations at home about it. And so really reminding myself of what is the daily life of a teacher, I get that at home every day, and it helps me be more effective. Oh, this is the most fun. So if you follow me on Facebook, you know this, but I have to share this story because it is just such a fun story. So I get a call about 4 weeks ago. Erin, this is the Seattle storm. Where have I heard that before? This time I'm really too old to be touring out, okay? But they said, hey, are you interested in being the chaplain for the WNBA finals? Like, what is that? I don't even know. There's a chaplain? And they said, yeah, we have someone who, you have to prepare a 5-minute speech for both teams, and then you get to pray for both teams, and then you get to pray just for the storm. You saw the outcome, right? Anyway, so I said, sure, yeah. And then she said, and if you'd like, you can stay for the game. If you'd like, you can stay for the game. Anyway, so I show up, and I'm getting ready to meet the coach outside of the stadium. And this young lady, who's Allie, her dad sees me, and he comes running up. He said, you must be a power forward. I said, yes. He said, my daughter plays power forward in the Special Olympics, and I really want her to meet you. And I think he must have assumed I was a Seattle Storm at first. I'm not one of them. But anyway, she shows me our poster. And, of course, I'm a teacher, so I start asking her questions. Who's that? And who's that? Oh, my gosh, that's such an awesome poster. And Dad is crying, because most people don't give her the time of day. But I'm a teacher. Like, I love this stuff. So we're engaging. And Allie turns around just as Sue Bird pulls in at the gate. And Sue sees her and gets out of her car and hugs her and signs her poster. And Dad and I are like, whoa, that's so beautiful. But it was such a great way to start the day. And then I walk into the stadium, and who's the first person there but one of my teammates from my men's basketball team? He just happens to be working as the sound guy that day. And then the best story of all. So I am watching the game. I'm probably about 15 rows up. And suddenly everyone in front of me is turned around facing me and looking behind me. And they're all pointing and yelling. Well, the mascot was climbing over bodies, like body surfing over everyone. And there was a seat right next to me. And he sits in the seat, and he leans over, and he says, Miss Jones, it's Ransom from 6th grade French. I mean, there were 20,000 people at the game. But he said, Miss Jones, I saw on Facebook that you were going to be here. So I was looking for you. But here's the cool thing. You can go to the next picture. Here's what's so awesome about this, though. Ransom has been following me on Facebook. I had him as a 6th grader. He just finished his master's in education at UW. And he said, Miss Jones, why am I doing what I do? Because I've been watching you a long time. And he just got recruited by the Chicago Bulls. He's their mascot and the head of their education programming for the Chicago Bulls. And then last kind of funny story, you can go to the next picture. So the game is over, and we won both of the finals games home. We won them all in the end, but this is after the second game. Well, I was a practice player for Notre Dame because my husband went to grad school there. And Notre Dame has the same coach that they've had since I was there, Meffett McGraw. Well, the star player for the Seattle Storm went to Notre Dame. And so I already knew about her, and I brought my jersey just because I'm like that. I just had my jersey in my bag, and I said, I'm going to meet her. But there were like 6 police officers on the court after the game. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to walk like I belong here. I look like a Seattle Storm player. And I literally walked across the court. Timmy Foster and I walked across the court like we owned the space. Not one person stopped us. And I got to meet the star player, Jewel, which was just so incredibly powerful. And it turns out that when the mascot sat next to me, her brother had been sitting in the seat right in front of me. And so I got to meet her brother afterwards, too, and he said, girl, I watched that whole thing happen yesterday. That was so awesome. But just kind of a fun story. Next picture. Got a couple more. 2 weekends ago, I got to go to my 30th high school reunion. And why is that important in this context? Because those of you who've heard me tell my story before know how important it was for me that I grew up overseas. I grew up at the United Nations School, and I knew that I was around really powerful people. I didn't realize until my reunion how powerful the people were that were around me. So there's a person in this picture who works for either the CIA or the FBI. His father was friends with Gaddafi. And when the American government sent the warships in to kill Gaddafi, he watched it from his backyard. He watched the ships take off. None of the other countries in Europe would allow ships to take off or drive through their airspace, so the American base in the Netherlands was where those ships took off, and he sat in his bedroom and watched them, knowing that his father was friends with Gaddafi. There are other people who are not in this picture who are such personal friends with George Bush that they literally had pictures at the reunion of them with George Bush in tennis shoes. Just Barbara and George and the kids hanging out. I also learned that there were 2 bums they were always outside our school. They were CIA officers because the ambassador's son went to our school. All these things that I had no idea about at all, but I was around that. And what was really awesome was that all of them had been following me. And almost every one of them said, Erin, we never thought about race until you ran for office, and then we began to watch you. And thank you for being a leader. And the reason that's so important is because I was just a teacher's kid. These kids were powerful. Their parents run countries. But I was just a little teacher's kid. And here's what's so important. I had a conversation. I can't remember who just had this conversation with me. Every single one of my teachers at the American School of The Hague believed I could be amazing. I had one teacher in my entire career who didn't believe that I could be amazing. One teacher who did not believe. Every single one of my teachers from kindergarten to the day I graduated believed that I could be president someday and told me that. And sitting with my friends from the American School of The Hague, every one of them communicated the same thing. We were always told we could do anything. Why did I become a teacher? Because I believe every one of our babies deserves to believe they can be absolutely anything. And the messages that we tell babies as early as 5 years old and 6 years old and 10 years old absolutely matter. And in this country right now, our babies are not getting the message that they can be anything. Our babies are not getting the message just because President Obama was elected. They are not getting the message that they could be president anymore. And why do I teach? Why do I work with kids? Because our messages are absolutely powerful. And to be around my friends and to be reminded that we were constantly affirmed and challenged. So here's the difference. You can be in school and tell kids, oh, you're phenomenal, even if they're doing nothing. And you can say, oh, you're so fabulous. Kids know when that's empty. Our teachers told us we were fabulous, and then they held us to a really high standard. My dad was the hardest math teacher in our school. Do you know, I heard from 3 or 4 people there, man, I got a D in your dad's class, but he was my favorite teacher. He made me learn that algebra. He made me learn that calculus. That's what I want for the babies. I want high expectations, high support. And how do I know we can do it? Because I watched it my entire life. I watched my dad write a new test for every single chapter, all 12 years that I was in school. Every single chapter that he taught, he would handwrite a new test. And I'll never forget, there were these 2 Japanese girls, Hiroko and Yoshiko, in my math class, who got 100% on every test for the first 3 tests. And my dad would think up an extra credit problem hoping they'd get it wrong. I mean, he would spend hours trying to think, because he knew he wasn't pushing them enough. But he also knew he didn't want us to fail because of it. So it was always an extra credit problem. But my dad would stay up hours. Why do I do the work that I do? Why do I believe in excellence? Because it was modeled for me. And I believe all of our babies deserve it. Go ahead to the next picture. I think I got 1 or 2 more. So I had the opportunity to speak at a missionaries conference in Bellevue last week. Audience of white conservative people. And here's what I said to them. I don't need y'all colonizing anybody anymore. I don't need you going across an ocean to love on some poor black and brown children when you don't love them right in your own home. About 30% of my time I spend in all-white audiences, very conservative audiences. The greatest thing about the election and losing an election is I learned how to say stuff and not care what people think. I do not have a boss anymore. I got my God and my husband's. And that's it. And so it has given me this courage to get into some spaces. And what's crazy is people keep inviting me back. I was just with youth pastors yesterday in Spokane, all white youth pastors except for 2. There were 2 black men in a room of about 50 people. And I told them too, I said, I don't need y'all colonizing kids. Kids should not think they need to assimilate in order to be successful. And here's one of the most important lessons that I've learned. There's a couple really important lessons I've learned. We have to, as black people, learn how to speak to white people because they are in power in lots of spaces. And if we piss them off and they're not listening anymore, so it's this balance, it's this dance all the time. I am doing this dance. Why do I run? Because it's uncomfortable. I have to walk in spaces and feel it. Okay, can I say that thing that I really want to say? Or do I need to hold off right now and be invited back to say that thing? That's the delicate dance we're in, but our babies deserve for us to be in that delicate dance. It's really important. So these are some of the people that I get to mentor. Little biracial girl at my church. Brittany, I have known her and her sister Lauren, who is an assistant principal in Tacoma, I have known for the last 20 years. Sewing into people and having people sew into me. So who are the people that are around you that you're sewing into? And who is sewing into you? We all need that give and take. Can't be always giving. You got to be receiving too. Next picture. Now I want to end this part of the talk by explaining why I am dressed the way I'm dressed. Those of you who've known me a while know I'm usually in big old heels and a suit. I have worn only Nike for the last 6.5 weeks. Since the day of the Just Do It campaign, I watched the blow up. And I've been watching how my white Christian friends have responded to Colin Kaepernick. And I am not saying that I agree or disagree with what he chose to do. But here's what I will tell you. Nobody gets to tell me how to be an American. Nobody gets to tell me how to be a patriot. I have lived in 3 countries. I know what it is to be American outside of the United States. I've traveled to 14 countries. I'll never forget when my father-in-law, so Jesse and James's dad, is one of the toughest people I've ever met. He fought in Korea, fought in Vietnam, took bullets for this country. He's not a happy man, not a nice man. But his grandfather was a slave. His father was a sharecropper. He has every reason to not be a happy man. And I'll never forget when he called my husband a year and 3 months ago in tears, and he said, I live in Tucson, Arizona right now, and every time I play golf, all these white men around me who are rich, who never fought for this country, want to tell me how I should be a patriot. And through his tears, he said, I took bullets for this country. I know what it is to be American. And I took bullets so you could choose to stand or kneel. James, am I crazy? My husband said, no, you're not crazy. That's what freedom is. Having the option. And so when people lost their minds over Kaepernick being chosen to be the face of the Just Do It campaign, I made a very conscious choice. I will wear Nike. And I went to Goodwill and bought up all the Nike that people gave away. I'm not a dummy. And then I went to the outlet store and I bought I have about 20 pairs of Nike shoes, and I got every skirt. I didn't even know Nike made skirts, but I bought all 5 skirts I could find. And I have 3 pairs of dress pants, but I have worn Nike in every single space that I've been in for the last 6.5 weeks. And it's my way to push against the system that is trying to tell us what it means to be a patriot. And here's my truth. I could easily have gone back to Holland when I was 20 years old, and it would have been much easier for me to live there. But I chose this country. And I see what's happening to some of our babies. And here's my truth. The flag doesn't mean the same thing for everybody, and until it does, I will wear Nike. And I've been on national stages with my Nike on. I was in Nashville last week. And there are some people that have a real problem with it. Have a problem. I have a problem with where we are right now. And I think the greatest thing about being American is that we can challenge the system and say, what will make us better? Us better. All of us better. And I believe that's an obligation that we have, especially as educators. And so I'm not going to play the video, but if you have not seen the Just Do It video, it is everything that I talk to kids about all the time. Do you have a dream that is crazy enough that you're willing to give up and sacrifice everything for it? It's a message I share with kids every day. So it's not just about being American, it's about the Just Do It campaign is what I believe is our best message to young people right now. So if you haven't watched it, I would encourage you to watch it. Here's some of the work that I get to do, that I've gotten to do in the last year. Kent, Shoreline, Auburn, Bellevue, Spokane, North Thurston, Bridgeport, organizations, King County Assessors, Metro Parks, Girl Scouts of Western Washington, white churches, Youth for Christ, YWCA and YMCA. And I say white churches explicitly because here's the reality. If we are just working with people who look like us, we are not going to move the needle. And here's what I know. I know that I was made black and white for a reason. I was raised by white people to understand how to talk to white people. I get my privilege. I know my privilege. I am very aware that being able to speak 4 languages, that's how I got sound today. I spoke Spanish to the sound guy who said we didn't have any sound. And I spoke Spanish to him. Right? It's about, I see you. And when people know they are seen, they are willing to step outside of what they're supposed to do. And so I know my privilege. Each one of you in this room has privilege. You wouldn't be here today. And so how are you using that privilege? How are you using that privilege to disrupt some narratives? Go ahead to the next slide. Actually, I want to stop. Actually, go back. Here's what I want to ask you. If you were to think about what are the narratives that are being told right now about black children, boys and girls, I want you to I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes at your table to have a conversation. What are the most predominant narratives that are being told about our children right now in the United States of America? And more explicitly, I want you to think about, in your particular space, wherever you work, what are the narratives that are being told? I've lived on the East Coast. I've lived in the Midwest. I've lived in Oregon. I've lived here. In Washington State, I hear people all the time say, I'm colorblind. And I'm very explicit with people. I'm very explicit with people that you cannot, if you are Norwegian, grow your hair like mine. So you see me, right? And so you're lying when you say you're colorblind, unless you're 1% of the population who's actually colorblind. You're actually lying when you say that, right? But secondly, what it means, as most of you know, is it means that you don't really see that my story may be impacted in different ways by the narratives that are told about people like me. I want to unpack the term race. Go ahead to the next one. And this is something that I teach in all kinds of different spaces. Race is what other people see. It is not biology. And it was created in order to maintain power structures. But here's why the notion of race can't just be erased. So I've had a ton of people now say to me, especially on Facebook, Erin, if you would just stop talking about race, racism would go away. That's nice for you. That's not my reality. And here's why I tell people we have got to be explicit about talking about race, because in this country, because of the way that we crafted this narrative, there are stories about each race. So why do we need to talk about race? Because of the stories that are associated with skin color. Those stories that you all know, right? And until we change those stories, we need to continue talking about race. I'm not going to play this, but I want to encourage you, if you are an educator, New York Times, and I can send anyone this PowerPoint who wants it, but the New York Times has 25 videos on race. They are designed for students, but here's what I'll tell you. I use them in training with educators all the time. Powerful. This particular video is about 12 minutes of black boys sharing their stories. Here's why video becomes powerful. Because here's often what people will do. They will write off your individual story. Now, that's just you. You're just having a little attitude. You got a chip on your shoulder. What's powerful about these is it's 10 to 12 different boys sharing stories that have incredible connection. And so when people can see there's a pattern, oh, wow, and it's not just happening here in Washington, it's happening there too. It's powerful. So this is a really great resource for you to use. But I want you to understand something. Because of the narratives that our young people are hearing about themselves, they also have narratives about those in authority. Especially if you're a white person in authority, especially if you're a white teacher. But here's something that Stephen Brookfield says. Not trusting teachers has several consequences for students. They are unwilling to submit themselves to the perilous uncertainties of new learning. They avoid risk. They keep their most deeply felt concerns private. They view with cynical reserve the exhortations and instructions of teachers. Now, there's someone in this room today whose students I got to visit this week. And I was mortified by what I heard out of these young people's mouths, because these young people describe teachers who belittle them on a regular basis. And as much as I didn't want to believe those stories, because I don't ever want to believe teachers can be as cruel as these young people were describing, when the kids left the classroom, I witnessed teachers treat them exactly how they had just described. And I'm still devastated and trying to figure out how I'm going to be part of the solution in a building where I don't work, in a district where I don't have any authority. But here's what I know to be true, because I've spoken to 200,000 kids in the last year and a half. This kind of stuff is happening in way too many buildings, where our children are being belittled, they're being cussed at, yelled at, treated as less than human, and then we wonder why they get in trouble. We wonder why they get in fights and act out. Well, because you've been treating them like animals, like they're less than human. And that's happening right here in Washington State, right here in King County. And that's unacceptable. And for those of us who are in spaces of authority, we have to call those things what they are. We have to call them out. We have to be courageous. And for me right now, it is the gift of being my own boss, that there are things that I can say and get away with that you probably can't. But when you can, please speak up, because our babies are being wounded in the system, and it's just not right. So there are two common refrains that I hear as I'm out in community about black children and black people. Black people are dangerous and or physically aggressive. This leads to greater punitive action and the expectation that black students, especially boys, are just supposed to play sports. Right? If you're just physical, then go play football or basketball. And we tend, I've witnessed this too, a white boy and a black boy do exactly the same thing, but the black boy is seen as dangerous. And the white boy is just playing around. We've pathologized black boys, right? Second thing that I hear wherever I go, black people are less intelligent than white people. This assumption that they're less intelligent. And so more black children in special ed programs and less that are recommended for gifted or advanced programs. So I just asked you to talk about some narratives. What are some other narratives that you're hearing that you'd be willing to share out loud? And I'm going to run to you and give you the mic so that we can get it on camera. What are some other narratives besides these two that you are hearing in either as a nation or in your school spaces about black children? This is my new sister girl right here, Millicent.
A narrative that I hear all the time is that how we take up the most unemployment and low income and resources like DSHS when I actually did the research, and it's not our race, but that's what I hear.
So there's a couple, but one of the things that I want to highlight a lot, and I want to highlight this because I feel like I experienced this as well, but in schools is the black girl attitude. A lot of the times the students want a relationship with their teachers, however, they don't know how to make that connection, and when they feel disrespected, then they automatically will come across as disrespectful. And so that's the narrative is, I can't work with this student because she always has an attitude. Another one is, I just want to feed off of the aggressive. A lot of black boys fight all the time. Black boys always fight. They're always being suspended. So that's another narrative.
Black parents don't care about their kids.
Yes.
Black men are dangerous. Do not allow them in your schools.
Oh, and push them out if they're there.
Black kids don't have fathers.
That's good. Anybody else? So you all know these narratives, right? And we see them perpetuated over and over and over and over. I have a bunch of tools in the PowerPoint. I built a PowerPoint that was bigger than I knew I could deliver because I want you to have some tools. So teaching tolerance, I hate the word tolerance. Just let me put it out there. I hate that word. I do not want to be tolerated. And I don't want to just tolerate anyone. But they have the best resources on having these conversations with kids. So there's what I love about their website right now is they have a whole link on immigration. What are the facts about immigration? But they also have what are the facts about Black Lives Matter? How do you talk about Take a Knee? It's a really great tool. So again, if you want those resources, please just ask me for them and I will send them out. Here's the truth about our babies. I just want to end by sharing some truths about our children. The young ladies in the top left-hand corner are from Shelton, Washington. Now, you may not be aware that there are black people in Shelton. There are 5 of them at Shelton High School. And 2 just came to the Teaching Equity Conference at St. Martin's University, and they came because their white teacher knew they needed a role model, and she's been following me on Facebook, and she's been telling my story to these biracial girls, and said the 2 girls came with their teacher on a Saturday for the entire day in order to meet me and to be around me. Mathematicians, both of them. Want to be math teachers. Here's another narrative about black babies that we need to disrupt. They're not good at math. My son is double majoring in mathematics and computer science. Right? Our kids can do that, but we need to tell them they can. We need to stop letting people tell our babies that they can't do math. It's just not right. This young lady in the bottom left-hand corner, I think went to Lakes High School. She managed an audience. We're in Kalispell, Montana. Do you know her? No. Okay. She was, got excited there. I saw that. But she's a Lakes graduate. She heard me speak when she was a freshman in high school. She is now a senior in college. And she managed 500 freshmen at Flathead High School in Kalispell, Montana, brilliantly. She led activities for 500 kids she'd never met before. Our kids can lead. Another truth. So how many of you have ever watched Supergirl? There's a show on TV. Yeah, y'all don't have any idea. But that's Mehcad Brooks up there. He's a Stanford graduate. And he's one of the stars in the show Supergirl. Literally, my husband and I got off the plane from Mazatlan, Mexico in LA, and we had to transfer. And I had just watched an episode of Supergirl, and I'm walking past Mehcad. I said, honey, is that? He said, yes, just go meet him, because it's another picture. It's another picture. But I got to talk to him, and he's a Stanford graduate. And I think, when I think about Richard Sherman as a Stanford graduate, Doug Baldwin, our babies can be athletes and academics. They don't have to pick one, right? So the young people down here are Tacoma kids. I love these two. So I've known these two for 15 years, since they were, maybe 10 years, since they were in middle school. But both of these students were Act 6 students. And here's what's cool about Jonathan Adams. He's the one in the heels, by the way. I said, I have those heels at home, Jonathan. But he graduated from Mount Tahoma High School, did not get the Act 6 scholarship, but something told him, call PLU and say, thank you for letting me have an interview. And when he called, Melanie Cunningham said, oh my gosh, somebody just declined. Because you called, I'm going to give you the last scholarship. And he now has his master's degree in social work and just got hired in Washington, D.C. Our babies are brilliant. Last picture. This is one of my babies from Federal Way, who I began mentoring when she was a sophomore in high school. We would have coffee every other week when she was at Thomas Jefferson High School. I went to her graduation. She went off to Gonzaga. I actually spent a semester at Gonzaga working there with students 2 years ago. And I was going to do some training for the Act 6 program and all of their staff. And I walked in, and she surprised me. She just got hired as the Act 6 director, which was my first job after being a teacher. So to watch my student now take over, and she said, Miss Jones, I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. But this represents just a small piece of the brilliance. And so I want to close today by saying to us that the most important thing we can do right now is to change the narrative. And we have to fight the narrative every single day. And it is like a marathon. It is not a sprint. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to take all of us collectively speaking into spaces. And when we hear people say things that are not our babies, we need to reject them and say, you know what, that's just not true. That is just not true. You are not correct in that. Here's who our babies are. And here's what I believe. When the legislature believes that our babies are brilliant, they will invest more in advanced programs for our children. When the legislature believes our babies can do math, they will invest more in STEM. But right now, they don't believe. And we can ask for more money. But until we've convinced them to believe, and until we've convinced every educator to believe, because just our belief right here is not enough. But imagine collectively if we could go out every day and sow those seeds and push into those spaces. And so I challenge you today to begin training for that marathon, because we're on it and our babies deserve it. Thank you.